They say every great love story starts with coincidence. But sometimes, coincidence is just a mask fate wears when it wants to test you. For Claire Monroe, it began on an ordinary Thursday. The kind of day that smelled like rain and coffee and the sound of other people's success echoing down Manhattan streets. She was late for a client meeting, clutching a stack of event proposals and a half-broken umbrella, when a sleek black car nearly splashed her with mud. She jumped back, swore under her breath, and then the tinted window rolled down. "Miss, I'm terribly sorry," came a calm, deep voice, the kind of voice that could sell apologies or empires with equal ease. And when she looked up, she saw him, Nicholas Hale, the billionaire, the man whose name lit up magazine covers and tech headlines. Sharp jawline, tailored suit, silver watch worth more than her year's rent, and eyes that made you feel like he already knew what you were going to say. "It's fine," Claire muttered, trying to step aside. But he smiled, that slow, deliberate smile that made it hard to move. "At least let me make it up to you," he said. "You look like you've had a rough morning." It wasn't a pickup line. It was a statement, observant, controlled. And somehow she found herself agreeing to coffee, mostly because saying no felt impossible under that gaze. At the cafe, time moved differently. He asked questions that made her feel seen, not studied, about her dreams, her work, her stubborn belief that small businesses could still do big things. He listened, really listened, in a world full of people waiting for their turn to talk. By the end of the hour, she was smiling again. By the end of the week, he'd sent flowers to her office, no note, just timing. By the end of the month, her friends were saying, "Claire, this might actually be it." And maybe it was. Because Nicholas Hale didn't chase women. He chose them. He took her to rooftop dinners with violin music and city lights that looked like a galaxy built for two. He made her laugh at things that weren't even funny, just because it felt good to see him smile back. He said things like, "I like that you don't need me to impress you. And you're different, Claire." Refreshingly real. And she believed him, because for once, life didn't feel like survival. Felt like arrival. Her career soared too, thanks to a few anonymous recommendations that landed her high-end clients. She told herself it was coincidence, though part of her knew who was quietly pulling the strings. Then came the night everything shifted. They were at his penthouse, the kind of place where silence was expensive and the view could make you forget what loneliness looked like. He handed her a glass of wine, kissed her softly, and said, "I want you to move in." The words hung there, beautiful, terrifying, final. She hesitated. "Nick, it's just fast." He smiled again, but this one didn't reach his eyes. "Fast isn't bad. When you know, you know." She laughed nervously. "You sound sure." "I am," he said quietly. "I've never been unsure about you." That night she said yes. And that night she stopped being just Claire Monroe. She became Nicholas Hale's girlfriend. At first it was paradise. Private dinners, weekend trips to the Hamptons, gifts that made her blush and feel small all at once. But paradise has cracks if you stare long enough. The first one came when she found out he'd canceled one of her client meetings, without telling her. "It was a waste of your time," he said casually over breakfast. "They weren't good enough for you." Then came the texts. He wanted to know where she was. Constantly. Not out of love, but out of habit. "Just making sure you're safe," he'd say. But safety started to feel like surveillance. Her friends noticed first. "You've been quiet lately," they said. She brushed it off. "Just busy." But busy was becoming lonely. And every time she tried to pull away, he gave her something to stay for. A vacation, a gift, a promise that sounded like forever. Then came the gala, a night of champagne, cameras, and powerful names. He introduced her to everyone as the woman who keeps my world in order. But when one of his business partners complimented her dress, Nicholas's hand tightened just a little too much around her waist. The smile never left his face, but his eyes had changed. Later that night, in the back of the limousine, she said softly, "You hurt me back there." He didn't look at her. He just exhaled and said, "Don't embarrass me in public again." The words landed like glass shattering in silence. That's when she realized, love shouldn't sound like control. But control often hides behind beautiful words. She stayed, though, because leaving felt like failure. Because she still remembered the man who made her laugh under the rain. Because she still wanted to believe that maybe it was love. But in truth, she was falling for a version of him that never existed. And he was falling for the power of being needed. They say love and lust wear the same perfume at first. The difference is what lingers when the scent fades. And as Claire watched the skyline that night, reflection ghosting on the window, she whispered the question that would define her story. Was it ever love? Or was I just the mirror he needed to see himself? Because in the end, the heart doesn't break when it's lied to. It breaks when it finally sees the truth. They say love gives, but lust takes. And sometimes it takes everything. The first time Claire felt the shift, it wasn't in words. It was in the way Nicholas touched her. At first, his hands had been gentle, curious. Now they were searching, as if every inch of her skin carried proof that she belonged to him. His kisses grew deeper, his voice lower, his questions sharper. Who were you texting? Why didn't you answer earlier? Do you know how many men would kill to have you, and yet you're here with me? It sounded like passion, but it felt like possession. Still, she told herself it was love, that kind of intense, cinematic love that burns fast and bright. She told herself the jealousy was just proof he cared. And Nicholas knew exactly how to feed that illusion. He had a way of making every apology feel like a vow. He'd hold her close and whisper, "You make me lose control, Claire. No one's ever done that to me." He'd say it like it was romantic. And she wanted to believe it was. Because when he looked at her, it was like the world fell away. All the noise, the pressure, the self-doubt. His gaze made her feel chosen, wanted, consumed. But the more he wanted her, the less she recognized herself. Her world began to shrink. Dinners canceled, clients avoided, friends ignored. Nicholas didn't demand it directly. He just made it easy not to leave. "You've been working too hard," he'd say, slipping his hand around her waist. "Stay. I'll take care of everything." And he did, until she forgot what independence felt like. One night, she woke to find him watching her sleep. He smiled when their eyes met. "You're beautiful when you're quiet," he murmured. The words sent a chill through her. Not because of what he said, but how he said it, as if her silence was the version of her he loved most. Lust had replaced warmth. Control had replaced care. At a charity gala a few weeks later, she caught him speaking with a woman, tall, stunning, the kind of confidence money can't buy. They laughed. His hand brushed the woman's arm lightly, the same gesture he once used with Claire. Jealousy burned in her chest, hot, irrational, all-consuming. And for the first time, she understood his obsession. When she confronted him later that night, he didn't deny it. He just smiled, slow and dangerous. "Now you know how it feels," he said. "That's what you do to me every time you walk into a room." He kissed her then, not out of love but to reclaim her. The kiss was fire and fear. It was the kind of moment that leaves a bruise no one can see. Afterward, she sat by the window, the city humming below. He was asleep beside her, peaceful in the way only the powerful can be when they think they've won. And she whispered to herself, "This isn't love. It's a war where the prize is me." Still she stayed, because the line between desire and destruction had blurred. because somewhere inside her, the girl who craved affection had mistaken control for attention. Because every time she thought about leaving, she remembered the first version of him, the man who smiled under the rain. But love shouldn't need to hurt to feel real, and lust shouldn't feel like survival. When morning came, Nicholas kissed her forehead and said, "Let's start fresh. No more doubts." But as she looked at his reflection in the mirror, she realized something. Lust isn't about wanting someone. It's about wanting to own the part of them you can't have. And Nicholas Hale didn't love Claire Monroe. He loved the power of being her only world. As she dressed quietly, slipping into the soft silk blouse he'd bought her, she caught her own eyes in the mirror. Eyes that once held dreams, now holding questions. Maybe she wasn't the woman being loved. Maybe she was just the beautiful distraction that kept a broken man from facing himself. They say lust fades, but when it's built on control, it doesn't fade. Consumes. And somewhere deep down, Claire knew, if she didn't leave soon, she wouldn't recognize who she was when she finally did. They say every secret eventually looks for air. And in Nicholas Hale's world, air was expensive. For weeks, Claire had been pretending everything was fine, smiling at dinners, laughing at things she didn't find funny, wearing clothes that didn't feel like her. But inside, she was unraveling quietly, carefully, the way silk tears when you pull just hard enough. The first real crack came on a Sunday morning. Nicholas was out of town on business. Claire stayed behind, scrolling through the news when a headline caught her eye. Tech billionaire Nicholas Hale under scrutiny for data misuse allegations. She froze. The article claimed his company had been collecting private data from unsuspecting users, manipulating market information, silencing whistleblowers. She wanted to dismiss it until she noticed the dates. The same week Nicholas had surprised her with a weekend in Aspen. His company had been under investigation. The trip hadn't been spontaneous. It had been strategic. Her stomach twisted. She clicked deeper and found an old interview quote from one of his former partners. "He doesn't love people. He manages them." The words hit too close. That night, Nicholas returned earlier than expected. He greeted her with flowers and that same charming grin. But there was something new in his eyes, calculation. "You've been quiet," he said. "Just tired," she replied, trying to sound normal. He studied her for a moment. "You read something, didn't you?" Claire blinked. "What are you talking about?" He smiled, that dangerous practice smile. "You forget I know how you think." Her heart pounded. "I don't know what you mean." Nicholas stepped closer. "Claire, people lie. The press lies. Don't let them poison what we have." But the way he said what we have sounded less like love and more like ownership. Later that night, when he showered, she opened his desk drawer, the one he always kept locked. Inside, she found folders. Dozens of them. Her name was on one. Emails, schedules, photographs of her. From places she hadn't realized he'd been watching. Meetings, dinner reservations, even an old text she thought she'd deleted. He had everything. Her breath caught. This wasn't love. This was surveillance wrapped in affection. She put everything back before he came out, but something in her had changed. Fear had finally outrun denial. Over the next few days, she started planning. Quietly, cautiously, she transferred her savings to a separate account. She called her friend Megan, the one Nicholas had convinced her to stop talking to, and whispered, "I think I made a mistake." Megan didn't ask questions. She just said, "Where are you? Do you need me to come?" But leaving someone like Nicholas wasn't simple. He noticed the distance. He noticed everything. "Why haven't you been answering my calls?" he asked one night. His tone wasn't angry, it was worse. Calm. "I've been busy," she said softly. He smiled. but his hand tightened around his glass. "You're hiding something." She looked him in the eye. "Maybe I'm just tired of being managed." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Nicholas exhaled slowly, the mask slipping just enough to show the man beneath, the one who didn't like losing. He stood up, walked to her, and whispered, "Don't make me regret choosing you." The words hung there, heavy and dangerous. That night, while he slept, Claire packed a small bag. She didn't take jewelry or expensive dresses. Just her passport, a few clothes, and her courage. She looked back once, at the city lights reflecting off his penthouse windows, and realized every sparkle was just another illusion she had lived inside. By dawn, she was gone. She took a train out of the city, phone switched off, heart racing. For the first time in months, she could breathe. But freedom comes with echoes. Every notification sound made her flinch. Every stranger's glance felt like recognition. Still, she told herself it was over. She was done being the mirror to someone else's ego. Until 2 days later. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Miss Monroe," came the voice. Smooth, controlled, terrifyingly familiar. "You didn't think I'd just let you disappear, did you?" Her blood ran cold. "Nick, how did you?" "Don't worry," he interrupted. "I'm not angry. I just think we need to talk. You owe me that much." She hung up immediately, hands trembling. But within minutes, her hotel manager knocked on the door. "Ma'am, there's a delivery for you." It was a single white rose. No card, no note, just timing. Claire stared at it for a long time, the same way you stare at a warning written in poetry, because she finally understood what this was never about love. It was about control. It was about the thrill of being the one who always gets found. And as she packed again, heart pounding in her chest, she whispered the truth she'd been too afraid to say aloud. Lust wants to possess. Love wants to protect. And sometimes, the person who swears they'd die for you just wants to be the reason you can't live without them. They say silence is power. But for Claire Monroe, silence had become a prison. Padded with fear, lined with memories she couldn't outrun. For 3 days, she stayed in a small motel 2 towns away. She barely slept, barely ate. Every sound outside the window felt like footsteps coming closer. She'd escaped Nicholas Hale's world, but not his shadow. It was 2 a.m. when she made her decision. Running wasn't freedom. Telling the truth was. She opened her laptop, hands trembling, and began typing an email. Not to Nicholas, but to a journalist she once met at an event. A woman named Ava Reynolds. Someone who had once whispered, "If you ever see something worth exposing, call me." Claire hesitated for a moment, then hit send. The subject line was simple. "You were right about him." Within hours, Ava replied. They met in a quiet cafe just outside the city. Ava looked younger than Claire remembered, but her eyes had that same restless fire, the kind that only comes from chasing truths people pay to bury. "You're not the first woman to come forward," Ava said gently after listening to her story. "But you might be the one who can finally make it stick." Claire swallowed hard. "You mean, there are others?" Ava nodded. Not all of them survived his charm. Some lost their careers. Some disappeared from public view entirely. You still have a chance to end this. For the first time in months, Claire felt something new, purpose. Over the next week, Ava's team began collecting evidence. Financial leaks, anonymous testimonies, screenshots of messages Nicholas had deleted but never truly erased. And then Claire did something she never thought she'd have the courage to do again. She faced him. It happened on a Thursday, exactly 6 months after the day they met. Nicholas had agreed to see her, believing she wanted to talk things through. He didn't know she was wearing a recording device under her coat. When he entered the room, that same air of control followed him. Calm, confident, untouchable. "Claire," he said smoothly, "you look better." She forced a small smile. "Guess freedom suits me." He smirked. "Freedom? Is that what you call running away?" "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it's finally waking up." Nicholas laughed. Not kindly but cruelly. "You think you can outsmart me? You forget who made you." She looked him straight in the eye. "You didn't make me, Nick. You just broke me. There's a difference." For a moment his mask cracked. Just a flicker. But she saw it. The anger, the panic behind those perfect gray eyes. Then she said it, steady and deliberate. "You're going to lose everything. Not because I want revenge, but because people deserve to know the truth." Nicholas leaned back, jaw tight. "You think anyone will believe you? Look around, Claire. I own the narrative." She smiled. Not bitterly, but bravely. "Not anymore." Ava and her team were live-streaming the meeting to a secure server. Every word, every threat, every truth captured. And when Nicholas finally realized it, his composure cracked wide open. He stood abruptly, voice cold. "You made a mistake." Claire rose too. "Maybe, but at least this one's mine." She walked out before he could speak again. By the time she reached her car, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Calls from Ava, texts from unknown numbers, headlines already forming online. "Billionaire tech mogul under federal investigation after whistleblower revelation." It spread like wildfire. Nicholas Hale's empire collapsed within days. Partners withdrew, investors fled, and the carefully crafted image of the boy genius billionaire dissolved into scandal. He went silent, and for the first time the silence didn't belong to her. Weeks passed. Claire moved into a small apartment near the coast. Nothing fancy, but filled with peace. She started her own design consultancy, built on transparency and trust. And every morning, she'd stand by her window, sip her coffee, and let the light hit her face without fear of who might be watching. But even peace has echoes. One afternoon, she got a letter in the mail, no return address. Inside, a single line written in familiar handwriting. "You didn't destroy me, Claire. You just reminded me what I'm capable of." No threats, no signature, just the kind of message that keeps your heart awake at night. She stared at it for a long time, then burned it over the sink. Because some ghosts deserve no reply. Later that evening, she met Ava for dinner. Reporters had started calling Claire the woman who brought down a billionaire. But she didn't care about titles. She just wanted peace. "You did something most people only dream about," Ava said, raising her glass. "You took your pain and turned it into power." Claire smiled faintly. "I didn't win, Ava. I just stopped losing." As they talked, laughter finally came easier. The kind that didn't have to sound perfect to be real. And when she walked home that night, the city lights looked softer. No longer a galaxy of control, but of choices. Each one hers to make. Because in the end, love can blind. Lust can burn. But truth frees. And as the screen fades to black, her voice echoes softly. If you've ever mistaken control for love, remember this. The moment you choose yourself, the story changes. They say healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in quiet moments, when you stop chasing what broke you and start building what you deserve. For Claire Monroe, peace didn't come as a grand victory. It came slowly, through ordinary days that no longer hurt to wake up to. The scandal that destroyed Nicholas Hale made headlines for weeks, then months, and then, like everything else in the world of chaos and fame, it faded. The world moved on. But Claire didn't forget. She didn't forgive either. She simply let go, not for him but for herself. She rented a small studio near the ocean, where the sound of waves replaced the noise of the city. No bodyguards, no cameras, no one deciding what she should wear or who she should be. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. At first, the colors came out angry, reds, blacks, and golds that screamed instead of spoke. But over time, her brushstrokes softened. Blues appeared, then white, then light, in the kind of shades that only come from someone who's learned how to breathe again. One morning, while cleaning her desk, she found an old photo, the one Nicholas once had framed in his office. It was of them at the Hamptons, both smiling, both pretending. She stared at it for a long moment, then quietly tore it in half. Not out of hate, but out of release. That same week, Ava Reynolds called her again. "There's a women's foundation starting," Ava said over the phone. "Survivors helping survivors. We're looking for someone who understands both silence and courage." Claire hesitated. "You think I'm ready for that?" "I think you already are," Ava replied. "You just haven't realized it yet." So Claire joined. She began speaking at small gatherings, softly at first, unsure of her voice. But every time she told her story, another woman would approach her after, eyes wet, whispering, "Thank you for saying it out loud." And each time, Claire's voice grew stronger. Not louder, just truer. Months passed. The world forgot the scandal, but Nicholas Hale didn't vanish completely. He reappeared in business news once, a quiet report about a small tech firm overseas. No more spotlights, no more interviews, just a man stripped of the empire he built on manipulation. And somehow that was enough, because revenge was never the point. Freedom was. One night, as she watched the sunset over the water, Ava called again. "They're doing a documentary," she said, "about power, control, and how people rebuild. They want you to be part of it." Claire smiled softly. "Only if it's not about him." Ava laughed. "It's not. It's about you." That was the first time in a long while someone wanted her story, not her trauma. When the documentary aired months later, it opened with Claire sitting by the window of her apartment, soft light on her face. No makeup, no perfection, just truth. The interviewer asked, "If you could go back and change one thing, would you?" Claire thought for a long time before answering. "I used to think I'd go back and walk away sooner," she said. "But now I know. Every scar taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. I wouldn't change what happened. I'd only change how long I let it define me." The video went viral. Not because of scandal, but because of sincerity. Thousands of women commented, some thanking her for her bravery, others sharing stories of their own. And for the first time, Claire realized something profound. Sometimes, survival is not the ending. It's the beginning. A few weeks later, while walking home from a foundation meeting, she stopped at a small bookstore she used to visit before her life changed. Inside, a familiar scent, paper, coffee, and comfort. She picked up a journal and turned to the first blank page. At the top, she wrote, "The woman I became after I stopped apologizing." Then she smiled. As she left the store, her phone buzzed. An email notification from an unknown sender. No threats this time. No bitterness. Just 3 words. "I'm glad you're free." No name, but she didn't need one. She deleted it without replying. Because closure doesn't always need a conversation. Sometimes it's just the quiet understanding that you survived what tried to own you, and you're still standing. Later that night, she walked barefoot along the beach, the city lights flickering behind her, the tide brushing against her feet like forgiveness. A soft voice echoed in her head, her own this time. "I used to think love was about finding someone who completed me. Now I know love starts when you complete yourself." She looked up at the stars, calm, endless, unafraid, and smiled. Because finally, the woman who once mistook control for affection had learned the truest form of love. Freedom. They say pain changes people. Maybe it does. But it can also refine them, turn fear into wisdom and scars into strength. If you've ever loved the wrong person, if you've ever lost yourself trying to keep someone else, remember, your story doesn't end in the breaking. It begins in the becoming. Because in the end, love fades, lust burns, but freedom stays.
Subscribe for more echoes.